Mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice, and she said, "We are all just prisoners here of our own device. And in the master's chambers, they gathered for the feast. They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man. We are programmed to receive. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave." Welcome to another exciting episode of the Unrelenting Alchemist. Today we're going to talk about Hermes, the divine messenger, the alchemical guide, and the Gnostic light of the world. Hermes has been known as the Greek god of boundaries, of transitions, of communication, hidden knowledge, and he occupies a unique as well as multifaceted position within the Greek pantheon, within mythology, within religion, within esoteric philosophy. As the herald of the gods and the psychopomp who guided souls to the underworld, Hermes became a symbol of movement between worlds, between the seen realm and the hidden realm, between the divine and the mundane, between the living and the dead, between the physical and the spiritual. His significance transcends Hellenic tradition, evolving into a central figure in Hermeticism, a mystical philosophy that greatly influenced Gnosticism, Renaissance alchemy, and modern spiritual movements. This video is going to explore Hermes' mythological roots, his connection to alchemy and Gnosticism, and his ultimately exalted role as the great illuminator and the initiator of great spiritual transformation. So let's talk about the Hermes of Greek mythology, messenger as well as mediator. Hermes was born to Zeus and Maya, one of the Pleiades, in a cave on Mount Selene. From the very beginning, Hermes was precocious, but he was also cunning. By the end of his first day of life, he had invented the lyre from a tortoise shell and stolen the cattle of Apollo, an act emblematic of his trickster nature. Eventually, Apollo and Hermes would eventually reconcile, with Hermes offering the lyre to his half-brother as a token of peace. This story set the tone for Hermes' mythological role: clever, resourceful, but also operating in liminal spaces. As Hermes Psychopompos, he guided the souls of the dead to the underworld, becoming a conduit between the mortal world and the afterlife. As Hermes Logios, he was the god of eloquence, of language, and of interpretation. As Hermes Trismegistus, he became an embodiment of universal wisdom as well as the mystical arts. Hermes also served as a protector to travelers, to merchants, to thieves, further reinforcing his role as a god of boundaries as well as transitions. He moved freely between Mount Olympus, Earth, and the underworld, with his winged sandals and his caduceus marking his swift and sacred passage through and between the realms. So let's go into Hermes and the birth of Hermeticism. Hermes' transformation from mythological deity to mystical teacher began in the syncretism between Greek and Egyptian religion during the Hellenistic period. The Greeks equated Hermes with Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing, wisdom, and magic. This fusion gave rise to Hermes Trismegistus, the Thrice-Great Hermes, a semi-divine philosopher said to profess this profound knowledge of the cosmos, of alchemy, of theurgy, as well as amazing spiritual transformation. There is also the Hermetic corpus, and this is a collection of philosophical and spiritual texts which are all attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, which then became foundational in the development of what we now know as Western esotericism. Composed between the 2nd century BCE and the 5th century CE, these texts blend elements of Platonic philosophy, of Egyptian theology, of astrology, as well as mystical introspection. Central to the Hermetic thought is the idea that as above, so below. That the macrocosm, which is the universe at large, and the microcosm, which is the individual soul, are reflections of one another, and that understanding this correspondence brings about spiritual enlightenment. Let's go into Hermes and alchemy and the great work that he performed. Alchemy, far from being a proto-scientific attempt to transmute base metals into gold, was understood in Hermeticism as also being very symbolic, a symbolic process of inner transformation. Hermes was revered as the guardian of this sacred art. The Emerald Tablet of Hermes is a cryptic text that has survived through various Arabic and Latin translations, and it encapsulates the essence of Hermetic alchemy. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, and to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. This single sentence became the philosophical cornerstone of alchemical practice. The one thing referred to the prima materia, the universal substance from which all things originate and to which all things return. The alchemist's goal was to purify and perfect this substance, mirroring the spiritual quest for enlightenment, of wholeness, and unity with the divine. In other words, if we can think of the divine as an aspect being source, then from the source we came, and to the source we shall one day return. In this sense, Hermes serves as the initiator and guide through the alchemical stages of calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. These phases are both literal in medieval laboratories, but they're also symbolic in the mystical path of self-realization and discovery. The great work was not just about gold. It was about creating the philosopher's stone, the mythological perfected self, awakened and illuminated, and of unimaginable power. What about Hermes in Gnosticism as the revealer of hidden truths? Well, Hermes' influence also reached deeply into Gnosticism, which is a spiritual tradition that emerged in the early centuries of the Common Era, CE. Gnosticism emphasized gnosis, or direct inner knowledge of the divine, as the path to salvation. If the divine is the universal truth, then the universal truth is in all things. The material world, according to the Gnostic sects, was a flawed creation of a lower god or demiurge, and human beings were divine sparks trapped within the bodies of illusion. In this context, Hermes Trismegistus becomes a Gnostic revealer, a figure who imparts salvific knowledge to awaken the soul from its slumber. In the Pormandris, one of the central Hermetic texts, Hermes has a visionary experience with a divine being who identifies as the Nous, or divine mind. This being reveals the structure of the cosmos, the fall of humanity, and the path of return through spiritual purification and contemplation. If you've ever watched any of my videos on Sophia, I've talked about this quite often. So Hermes speaks, now that you have learned the meaning of the senses and the light and the darkness, contemplate what it is you must become. Gnostic cosmology often involved complex hierarchies of aeons and realms, but its heart was simple. Liberation comes through inner awakening. Hermes, as the logos, the word, the thought, the divine reason, guides this process of revelation. Let's talk now about Hermes as being the light of the world. Hermes' many roles converge in his identity as bringer of light. Unlike other gods who demand obedience, Hermes invites inquiry, self-reflection, and transformation. He is not the god who builds the temple, but the one who gives you the key to enter it. He encourages the seeker to go beyond appearances and pierce through the veils of illusion, what the Hermetic texts would call the shadow play of matter. In this role, Hermes is often associated with the concept of illumination, not just as intellectual insight, but as spiritual radiance, very much like the Shekinah. He carries the caduceus, a staff with intertwined serpents, symbolizing the integration of opposites, masculine and feminine, light and dark, life and death. The staff is also a symbol of healing, balance, and kundalini energy, which flows upward through the chakras in Eastern mysticism, again showing the universal echoes of Hermetic thought. In fact, if you have ever looked at how the chakras are oriented, the serpents are said to begin at the base. In the Asclepius, another Hermetic text, Hermes laments the coming decline of spiritual wisdom. Egypt is the image of heaven, and the whole cosmos dwells here. But the time will come when it seems that the gods have abandoned the earth. Despite this prophetic melancholy, Hermes remains a beacon for those who seek hidden truths. He becomes a symbol for the awakened soul in a slumbering world, a figure of hope, a figure of clarity, a figure of transcendence. So let's venture into the Hermetic path and the initiation and transformation that becomes involved. To follow Hermes is to embark on a journey of initiation. This is not a simple acceptance of dogma, but rather a path of personal transformation. And sometimes that will be difficult, and other times it will even be paradoxical. Hermeticism, like the Eleusinian mysteries, does not spoon-feed enlightenment. It provides signs, metaphors, riddles, and processes. The seeker must earn the truth, not through being lazy, not to having it handed to them, but through effort, through humility rather than ego, and through insight rather than ignorance. The initiation often involves confronting one's shadow, understanding the illusory nature of reality, discovering the inner divinity that has always been present. Hermes stands at the threshold, that sacred in-between space, and says, "Come forth." He guides the seeker through stages and rebirth, just as he led souls to the underworld and back. In psychological terms, Hermes resonates with Jung's archetype of the self, the totality of the psyche, and with the trickster who breaks through rigid structures to allow deeper truths to emerge. Yes, this is truly the opposite of dogma, and rightfully so. As Carl Jung himself said, Hermes is the god of revelation, and as such, the protector and guide of souls. He is also the master of transformation, bringing that which is hidden into the light. So what of Hermes in the Renaissance and beyond? Well, during the Renaissance, interest in Hermeticism surged. Thinkers like Marsilio Ficino, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, as well as Giordano Bruno, embraced Hermetic texts as repositories of ancient divine wisdom. They believed that these texts held keys to unlocking both spiritual and scientific truths, alchemy, astrology, and magic. were not separate from religion or philosophy, but rather they became integrated expressions of divine understanding. The rediscovery of Hermetic texts helped to shape an intellectual current which then gave rise to modern science, which then gave rise to the Enlightenment, and which eventually led to the occult revival of the 19th and 20th centuries. Even in modern esoteric traditions, such as Theosophy, Rosicrucianism, and New Thought, Hermes Trismegistus remains a central figure, often appearing as a guide in initiatory rituals and as the source of universal teachings. Contemporary spiritual seekers continue to find modern-day meaning in Hermetic aphorisms, using them as meditative tools or as frameworks for powerful self-transformation. In conclusion, Hermes is the eternal guide. Hermes, in his manifold forms, embodies the divine spark of wisdom, communication, and transformation, whether leading souls to the underworld, revealing cosmic truths through the Hermetic texts, or even inspiring the alchemists to purify their soul. Hermes plays a profound and timeless role. He is the light in the darkness. He is the voice in the silence. He is the key to the mysteries. As a symbol of spiritual initiation, Hermes beckons the seeker towards gnosis, not merely to know facts, but to become wise, not just to rise in intellect, but to descend into the heart, not only to escape death, but to transcend illusion and understanding the nature of eternity. In Hermeticism, Gnosticism, alchemy, and modern mystical practice, the esoteric message of Hermes endures. That which is hidden shall be revealed, and that which is veiled shall be unveiled. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it. Thank you for joining me in this sacred hour. This has been the Unrelenting Alchemist. And if I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I love you.